In August 2021, a friend of mine met Hendra, who at the time was a 79-year-old pensioner, after he fell over in front of her because his shopping bags were too heavy. She told me about it, and that evening we went around to see if he was okay, thinking that maybe we could help him with his shopping when he needed it. But when we got there, we were shocked to find that he was living in absolute squalor. He had no lights, very little furniture, no fridge, he lived on noodles, and the place was freezing cold because the windows couldn't close. He was cooking noodles and he had to hold a pen light so he could see the food. He told us the real estate agent wouldn't let him have a heater, and it was so cold because the windows couldn't close that he had to sleep fully clothed, wearing a scarf and a beanie. Hendra told us the lights and windows had been broken for over 10 years. Watch the video and decide for yourself whether he's telling the truth. It's pretty obvious the real estate agent and the landlord were negligent and had been for years, and it was clear that nobody was looking out for Hendra. So over the next week, we bought him furniture, clothes, blankets, a fridge, lights. We put straps on the windows as an interim measure so they could close, and we stocked him up on food. We bought him a phone so he could call us if he needed anything, and we checked in on him regularly, so he was doing okay. He's still doing okay, by the way, because we've been supporting him since. Now, a couple of months later, Hendra called and told us that he had an eviction notice from the real estate agency, which was Belle Property at Potts Point. We went around and it was a handwritten note from the agent, Diane Toomer, saying that Hendra owed over $1,000, and if he didn't pay it by that afternoon, which was a Friday, he'd be kicked out of his home of 20 years on the Monday. I called Diane and told her that she couldn't kick Hendra out without following due process, and asked her to send me the rental ledger so we could pay what he owed. I rang Fair Trading to find out Diane's registration details, but they couldn't find any record of her registration. Anyway, we sorted things out and we made arrangements so the rent was paid on time, thinking that would be the end of it. But over the next couple of months, they refused to repair the broken lights and windows, they had unscheduled inspections, and they sent text messages telling Hendra his rent hadn't been paid when it had been. Ultimately, it reached a point where I lodged a complaint with the Belle Property head office in the hope that they'd carry out the repairs and stop the Potts Point branch from bullying Hendra. But instead of fixing the problem, they wrote to say that they would give the landlord notice and no longer manage the property. Now let me tell you why this was so unethical. Belle Property managed the premises, and they had a legal obligation to ensure that it met a minimum standard. That meant the light should have worked and the windows should have closed. Belle Property was also required to ensure their agents were registered and they followed due process. So Belle Property had violated all sorts of regulations, but rather than fix the problem, they decided to stop managing the property so they could walk away from their violations. In my opinion, that was a despicable thing to do. If a decent person found out that their organisation had forced a 79-year-old pensioner to live in squalor, you'd think they'd step up to the plate, right? They wouldn't walk away. So I wrote back to tell them that I thought they were despicable. And in response, I received a threatening email from the CEO, Peter Hanscombe, telling me that I was being offensive. But the problem for Hanscombe is that in trying to defend his company, the dates he provided actually proved his company was liable. We've referred the matter to New South Wales Police Minister Yasmin Catley because the agents and the landlord should be investigated by the police for elder abuse, and Hanscombe should be investigated for being an accessory after the fact. You know, we hear a lot about dodgy real estate agents, but nothing ever seems to happen to them. The issue here isn't that Hanscombe walked away from his responsibilities as an agent. The issue is that he walked away from his responsibilities as a person. He didn't even bother to ask whether Hendra was okay. In my mind, Peter Hanscombe is despicable, and not only should he be investigated by the police, but serious questions should also be asked about whether he's a fit and proper person to hold a real estate licence.